So I always ask myself the Jeff Bezos famous question: if everything's going to change and everything is going to change, what's not going to change? And what I don't think is ever going to change is I think people always want a real asset. And I think they'll always want a good deal. So as long as those two things remain, then the land investing niche will continue to thrive.
Who's this? Oh, you're an entrepreneur? Oh, you're a real estate investor. Oh, you're trying to learn from those who did it. Well, come into the lab then. Put your white coat on, gloves on, notepad, and let's build, y'all. Experiment Nation, this message is for you if you are a short-term rental host. Pay attention closely, because if you recall, we had an individual by the name of Mark Simpson step into our lab and tell us the importance of building a short-term rental business where your clients and future guests are booking with you directly, not solely depending on OTAs such as Airbnb, VRBO, Expedia.com, the list goes on. And his reasoning behind it is that you want to leverage these OTAs and not be solely dependent on them so that you can actually build your business that you are in control of. Extremely important for you to do this, for you to be in control of your business and grow and scale it properly. Now, I did read the book from beginning to end, and the announcement is that he has launched a book called the Book Direct Playbook, which launches this February 2022. You want to make sure you get your hands on this book, because I certainly did from beginning to end, and I got more than just about OTA. He gave the foundation of true marketing, which is a specialty that he does because he is the founder of Boostly, who has helped numerous hosts over and over build very credible websites that allow the guests to book with you directly. Now, I want to highlight something. It's very important that you understand that Mark is not saying to not use OTAs. He's saying to leverage them to then be in control to build your own business. And he actually gives a very key gold template on how to actually create an incentive for your hosts, or your guests, I should say, to stay with you as a host by booking with you directly. There is a strategic way to do this, and he does cover this in his book. You want to make sure that you get his book at the link below. You see right here, boostly.co.uk/book. In this book, it will give you the foundations, marketing foundations, a key guide to guide, and at the same time, every chapter has the instructions sections that gives you guidelines on what the next call to action, what the next step is. You need to refer to it the exact same way you would refer to any book you have in the lab as a practitioner who's going to take action to take control of your short-term rental business. Again, that is boostly.co.uk/book. That's boostly.co.uk/book. Make sure you get your hands on this book. You will not be disappointed.
Real Estate Experiment. What is happening, y'all? Today, I have the pleasure of having Mark Podolsky in the lab with us, dialing in from, you said Arizona. Are you in Phoenix, or where are you at?
In Phoenix.
Damn. I was just telling Mark, I haven't been in Phoenix, and I need to make it down there because Mark, if you're listening to this right now, is glowing, and I want to have the energy that he has. And you can only have that energy either, when you're in a good place, and we'll talk about that in a second. But you're going through a marathon right now, which I appreciate you making the time to step in the lab with us. But I definitely want to take the time to highlight you and give you the introduction that you deserve in our very own lab. So, Mark, first of all, welcome to the Experiment Nation lab here, and we're excited to have you. How's it going today?
Thank you. Pulse is still normal. Respiration's fine.
Yeah, you're
Ruben,
still going, man.
I'm thrilled to be here.
I love it. Mark, so you have such an interesting background. I got a level set here because, you are an embodiment of what Experiment Nation is all about. We always talk about experiment, the real estate experiment. What is that? Well, there's so many verticals in real estate. There's fix and flipping, there's multifamily, there's storage, but then you are in a very, very, very niche, and it goes back to the foundation, No pun intended there. Or maybe it was intended. I don't know. But
Right.
you're talking about land, right? We're talking about land. And just to level set, I do want to give you kudos because, I always want to talk about you first because you're the reflection of your business. But just to level set, you are the founder of Frontier Equity Properties, LLC. You do have your own show, which I'm excited to hear about, as the host of the Best Passive Income Model and the Art of Passive Income podcast and the Land Geek podcast. And you're also the author of Dirt Rich, which is fascinating. And of course, you're a practitioner because that's the only folks that we allow here in the lab with us are practitioners who are not just, talking the talk, but they're walking the walk as well on a lot of land, apparently in your field, right? It's been over 5,000 transactions, which I'm interested to hear because when I hear that transactions, that's interesting because I have to think that at some point somewhere you started someplace and then you said, you know what, this land thing is going to be my 80-20. So why don't you I'm going to ask you up front, we're going to do a little reverse engineer exercise here, but why land? Why, Mark? Why land?
Well, first of all, land is great for someone like me because, you talk about multifamily or fix and flip, like I can barely change a light bulb. So I like the idea of not having to deal with anything physical. I also like the idea of not having to deal with tenants. I like the idea of not having to deal with termites or any kind of cleanup, trash, right? So for me, land is really an interesting asset class in the sense that it's this one-time sale. I get recurring income every single month, and I don't have to deal with any of the headaches of traditional real estate investors, no renters, rehabs, renovations, or rodents. And then when we look at it from a legal standpoint, because I'm not dealing with a tenant, I'm exempt from Dodd-Frank, RESPA, and the SAFE Act, all this owner's real estate legislation. So it's really a simple model where you got a buyer, a piece of land, and a seller, and that's it.
So, Mark, you talk about buying, selling, leasing, and first of all, I love that you're very upfront of like, hey, I know what I'm good at, I know what I like, I know what I don't like. That's which is the most important thing, and this is actually why we have the show because we bring in guys like you who have done it, and it's like, let me go down this avenue because this experiment actually worked. So just to put things into context, we said buying, selling, and leasing. When you say you don't have to deal with you, all you have to deal is with passive income, and you don't have to deal with any of the day-to-day obstacles that we find ourselves dealing with some of the traditional investor. Are you then just focusing on the transaction component of you have land and you sell it, and or you're looking or sourcing for land and you're buying it and then you step away? Like, give us a little bit of context for some of us who are sitting here still scratching our heads of, well, I know real estate is built on land, but where do we how do you turn that into a profitable business, and how is that sustainable? How does that even look like?
Okay, this is a really complicated question. I'll tell you what. I'm gonna use you as a case study. I'm gonna walk you through my model step by step. So, Ruben, where do you live?
There's a loaded question. But I'll say Atlanta because I'm here in New York right now in the studio. But typically I am in Atlanta. That's my boots on the ground real estate. So let's talk about Atlanta.
Okay, so you live in Atlanta. I'm gonna assume that you own 5 acres of raw land in Texas, and you owe $200 in back taxes. So, Ruben, you're advertising 2 important things to me. Number one, you have no emotional attachment to the raw land. You're in Atlanta, properties in Texas. And number two, you're distressed financially in some weird way because when we don't pay for things like, property taxes, we don't value them in the same way. As a result, the county treasurer keeps sending you notices saying, Ruben, you don't pay your property taxes, we're going to auction off your land to a tax deed or a tax lien investor. So all I'm going to do is look at the comparable sales on your 5-acre parcel for the last 12 to 18 months. I'm going to take the lowest comparable sale. Let's use easy math. Let's say it's 10 grand. I'm going to divide by 4. That's going to get me what Warren Buffett would call a 300% margin of safety. So I'm actually going to send you an actual offer on your raw land of $2,500. Now you accept it because for you, $2,500 is better than nothing. In reality, 3 to 5% of people accept my quote unquote top dollar offer. But now that you've accepted it, I have to go through due diligence or in-depth research. I have to confirm you still own the property. Back taxes are only $200. There's been no breaks in the chain of title. There's no liens or encumbrances. There's no, what can I do on the property? What kind of restrictions are there? What's the access like, ingress and egress? So I have this whole big checklist of what I want in my land and what's going to be a deal killer, what's going to make it difficult to sell, all those things. I outsource that to my team in the Philippines. It's cost about $11. They're going to get me plat maps, aerial maps, satellite images, everything I'm going to need to sell that property to the next person. Now, if I'm investing $5,000 or more, I just do it traditionally through a title company. But this is only $2,500. I'll self-close. Now I own your property for only $2,500. I'm going to sell this 30 days or less. And I'm going to make a cash flow like a rental home.
Yeah, that's the part where that is the part where you got my attention, and I think it will help the listeners all understand the cash flowing component, because I think people understand the buying, the selling. Okay, one-time transaction, right? One time, but you're talking about passive. How does that component come into your business model?
Okay, so Ruben, I have a built-in best buyer. Do you know who it is?
No, I do not.
The neighbors. So I'm going to send out neighbor letters saying, here's your opportunity, protect your privacy, protect your views, know your neighbor. So oftentimes neighbors will buy it. Now, if they pass, go to my buyers list. My buyers list passes, I go to a little website you may have never heard of. It's called Craigslist, 10th most trafficked website in the United States. I go to one I'm pretty sure you've heard of called Meta or Facebook Marketplace, the buy-sell groups. And then I'll go to the lands, landmodo.com, landandfarm.com, landsofamerica.com, landflip.com, landhub.com. These are platforms where people buy and sell raw land. But the magic happens in my pricing, because all I'm going to ask is for a $2,500 down payment for this new buyer to control 5 acres of land in Texas. So they put $2,500 down and I'll make it a car payment. Let's say $399 a month and 9% interest over the next 84 months. So it's a one-time sale. I get my money out on the down. I might go 6 to 10 months out. Then it's $399 a month, 9% interest in the next 84 months, no renters, rehabs, renovations, or rodents. And it's a simple game. Can we create enough of these land notes where our passive income now exceeds our fixed expenses? And we're working because we want to, not because we have to.
Okay, so this is very interesting. So take us back, Mark, for a second, because just so, and I think there's the listeners here. There's a few of us. There's some who are buy and holds. There's some who have done wholesaling, and I myself have done wholesaling, so I understand more or less the concept. But you mentioned it, and just I want to make sure that doesn't slip through the cracks. You called it a land note. Do you want to just talk about how that component works? Because I think you used the car example. It's a fantastic one, but I want you to bring that home for a second, because I want to understand, who truly owns this piece of real estate from a deed perspective, and what you're doing there. I think that'll give us some great context of how this note and land buying a relationship works.
Right. So the note is basically a promissory note. So I'm the owner of the land, and you, as the buyer, are making payments to me. Now, let's take a housing example, right? So I go out and I get a $200,000 mortgage on this beautiful home. Now, the bank technically has what we call a lien on the home with a deed of trust.
Yes.
Now, what happens with a deed of trust is that ownership component goes to me. I get the deed with a lien attached on that house. Now, if I stop paying my mortgage to the bank, they will have to give me notice. I have so many days to cure. And if I don't cure that notice of default, it's going to hurt my credit rating. And they will eventually take that house through a legal proceeding called foreclosure. Now, that's a costly process and takes a lot of time. And emotionally speaking, nobody wants to kick anybody out of their own home. With raw land, we use a land contract, which means that the underlying asset remains in my ownership until you, the borrower, pays off their promissory note. If you go into default, you have 30 days to cure your default. And if you stop paying and you don't cure your default, I keep your down payment, I keep your monthly payments. And based on our paperwork, the land contract, I then get to resell that property, get a new down payment and a new monthly payment, extending out my ROI. My average ROI on a cash flip is 300%, and on a terms deal is over 1,000% because of time value of money. So it's way simpler. I don't have to get any lawyers involved. I don't have to kick anybody off anything because they don't live there. And it's just a simpler process.
Okay, so this is great. I'm glad you went there. Why would, or I should say, because I'll want to be very keen on how I ask this question. Who is the avatar that you're targeting? You talked about land exists next to neighbors, etc. My next question might be, what will be the purpose of their use to buy a note from you? What are they doing? Are they farming? Are they, because where I'm going to go next is they can't build on that land, can they? Because it's your land. So what is the use of this land that you find yourself, the typical person who buys a note from you is utilizing that piece of land for?
So a lot of them, when they use it recreationally, sometimes they want to one day build once they pay off the note. Oftentimes there are people that we call preppers. They're hoping for the best. They're preparing for the worst. They want a place to bug out to. Oftentimes they're what I call legacy investors. So they never thought they would own this asset because typically they think, oh, it's so expensive to own raw land. If you're coming from Atlanta and you're looking at, land in Atlanta, you're talking about real money. And then all of a sudden you say, oh my gosh, I can own 40 acres of raw land in Nevada for $30,000. Sign me up. So land that has no restrictions, is only limited by your imagination. It's very compelling. I've done this now over 6,000 times. I've never been stuck with a piece of raw land. There is literally a pig for every barn. There is a lust for land in this country that you wouldn't believe. It's a massive market, and people love it. No kidding.
So in my head, I would think, okay, great. So I'm an LLC and I run, an event every year. Like, I don't know. I've never actually been. I might go Coachella or something. You've heard, right? There's music festivals. I get that. We'll rent it out. We'll pay Mark his note, and then we'll have a carnival. But I'm just trying to think, when you're finding these places, is it your typical lot ready? I think there's a term that I forget what you guys call it when there's, everything's hooked up and you're able to, what is that called?
Like when it's like semi-developed, there's utilities.
Yeah, like it's all set up. I mean, I would imagine, Mark, it's not your traditional type of buyer. Like, I'm just trying to wrap my head around there. Like, who is really behind these note deals? I'm very curious. Do you have any examples of some avatars that are and when I use the word avatar, I'm sorry, that comes from my marketing background of the type of buyer that's buying these notes, just for some context for our listeners.
Well, let's first of all, the buyers are buying the land. I own the underlying note, right? So
yes,
I'm the note holder. Yeah. So
yes. Who the bank?
Right. So who's buying raw land is really the question.
Yeah.
What kind of person wakes up and thinks themselves, boy, I'd like some raw land today, right?
That's the question. Yeah.
So again, it's going to be people that grew up hearing own land. It's the only thing that lasts. It's going to be people that want to use it recreationally. It's going to be people that want to one day develop it or improve it. It's going to be people that come from a background where, they want to hunt, they want to fish, they want to take their ATVs out there. Military people love raw land. People that don't like people love raw land. Want to get away from it all. So, if you ever watch Yellowstone, right? You can have your own ranch type of thing. And it's affordable. So it's just, there's not like a typical avatar.
Oh, that's interesting. I think you painted the picture fairly well. I guess the next question I would ask you is from again, I think this will give our listeners some context, because you have to imagine that, you're probably so jaded, Mark, that you've been doing this for years, that we're still trying to wrap ourselves around. I think when you used the example of a car note, or even the bank, essentially that's what you're being, right? Because you own the note, and they own the land. So as far as what does that look like, and does it create any complexities if I was a real estate developer, and I got into, I wanted to build on a few lots? Is it the same structure? Would you then sell and not do the note structure? I'm just trying to make sure I understand, for some of us who are listening, who might try to think, okay, how can I use the same strategy Mark is using? When is it a great opportunity for me to use the note strategy versus the selling completely outright strategy without being on a note? When is it a good time? When is it a bad time to apply those principles?
Well, philosophically, I don't like cash. I want cash flow. So I would say it's always a good time to sell on a note, because then you're getting the cash flow as opposed to cash. Once I get the cash, I have to redeploy the cash. So I'm starting over every time I sell. Instead, I'd rather own the assets and have that cash flow. Now, at some point, that asset will convey ownership to the new borrower or the new buyer, and I have to replace it. But I've got years to do that. So I'm giving myself time to keep building up my deal flow machine to do that. Now, the issue is, well, aren't I going to run out of money? If I sell the property for $10,000, I paid $2,500 for it, but I only get $1,000 down. Well, it's going to take a while now to get my money out. Well, what's interesting about that is you can sell a partial on the note. So you can just sell a year's worth of the cash flow, get all your money out, and then redeploy the cash. So you can keep building up this is a wealth strategy. I don't care about being rich. I want to be wealthy. So, I can always make more money. I can't get more time. And being wealthy allows me to work when I want, where I want, with whom I want. What's awesome about this niche is, well, I can do it from anywhere in the world. All I need is a laptop and an internet connection, because it's 90% automated with software on the front end, inexpensive virtual assistants, and software on the back end. So basically, it just depends on you personally. Like, what's your personal situation, how you want to sell. For me personally, I want cash flow. There's a lot of people that they love the cash. They pay the tax, they do it again. I personally think that's a strategy for financial insecurity, but I've learned from Psychology of Money, that book, I think it's Morgan Hauser. No one's crazy when it comes to money. Based on all of our prior experiences, that's how we have our money views and how we grew up. So no one's really crazy when it comes to money, but that's just my take on it, is I want cash flow, not cash.
I love it. So let me ask you, I think that was a really good way to explain, how you view this concept as different from, the cash. I love that, the cash, having the cash versus having the cash flow, and being rich versus being wealthy. I love your philosophy on that. So let me ask you very tactically, because I like to give tactical examples to our listeners. Let's say, you structure a note, right? You basically have a developer who wants to buy the land, and you own the note. Is it, once they build, let's say, new construction on that land, and let's say, I'm trying to wrap my hands around the level of layers there, because what if they were to get some financing on the actual structure?
Okay, so I'm
financing. How does that work? Yeah.
So I'm the one financing it. I'm the bank. So if they want to build, they just pay off the note. It's literally that simple.
Oh, interesting. So you can't obviously be paying for the note, and also you can't rent on top of renting. It's almost right.
Right. Exactly. You can't get a builder's permit. You can't get a building permit from the county unless you can prove that you own the land. But I own the land. So, you as the developer have to pay off your note first before you can develop it.
Very interesting. That's good.
Now, if you want to use it recreationally while you're paying off your note,
Yeah.
fine with me. Go camp out there. I don't care. But you
Yeah,
can't make any
yeah.
improvements without my permission.
I love that. Okay, so I'm glad we covered that because I think that's something that was floating around. I'm sure as a thought of, okay, well, how does that look like in structure? So I told you I would reverse engineer. How did you? And I'm really excited because I actually work. We have an agency as well. Which is different from your business, but we work remotely and we have a team in the Philippines. So I want to get to the process behind it. I geek out around that stuff, but I told you I would reverse engineer. This is where you are today. How did you come across it? Did you stumble upon it? What were you? I know your core values are very clear. You're all about the cash flow. You're all about, not wanting to deal with headaches and tenants and all that stuff. But how did you discover it? Did you fall? Was that the first thing that you stumbled upon, or were there a few things that you had tried prior to leading to being as we call you, the land geek?
So if we rewind the tape to 2000, I was a miserable, micromanaged 45-minute commute to work and back investment banker, specializing in mergers and acquisitions with private equity groups. And Ruben, it got so bad for me. I would get I want to get the Sunday blues, anticipating Monday coming around. I get the Friday blues, anticipating the weekend going by really fast and having to be back at work on Monday. So my firm hires this guy. He's telling me that as a side hustle, he's buying up raw land, pennies on the dollar at tax deed auctions. He's flipping them online and he's making a 300% return on his money. And I'm looking at companies all day long, and a great company, has 15% EBITDA margins or free cash flow. Average company's 10%. And I'm looking at companies all day long, less than 10%. So of course, I don't believe him. So I've got $3,000 saved up for car repairs. I go to New Mexico with him. I do exactly what he tells me to do. I buy 10 half-acre parcels, an average price of $300 each. I flip them online, and they all sell for an average price of $1,200 each. It worked. So I took all that money. I went to another auction in Arizona, which is where I live. And again, it's 2000. There's no one in the room. I'm buying up lots and acreage for nothing. And I sold all that land and I made over $90,000 cash. So I go to my wife. I said, honey, I'm going to quit my job, become a full-time land investor. And she's pregnant. And she's like, absolutely not. So I said, okay. So it took me about 18 months for the land investing income to exceed the investment banking income. And then I quit, and I've been doing it full-time ever since.
For context, just to give our listeners, I mean, it's been over almost 20 years now?
22 years. 22
Jeez.
years. Yeah.
Wow, that's really fascinating. So that's interesting. So let's talk about because I think we talked about the note. Let's actually have some questions from the audience that I gathered before. So if we were to take a step back for a second, you talked about your buyers list. You talked about finding buyers for raw land. What are the tips for finding? Because let me take a step back. I would imagine when you flipped that piece of land when you're in Mexico, that's fascinating. What was your go-to initially for finding those buyers to flip land? Like, where do you go? What's that source? I know I'm sure it's changed now because you've been doing this for 20 years, but if someone's taking that first step, what are some sources? Did you mention Craigslist? I mean, is that where you would go first? Like, where is the source of buyers that someone could take an actionable action item on today?
The first place I used to go to, I don't recommend this anymore, but when I was starting out, I started out on eBay.
It's crazy.
It's crazy.
So people are actively shopping online for land, is what you're telling me.
They're actively shopping online for land. If I was starting today and I could only market on one platform today, I would market on landmodo.com. If I could only do one platform and I would get a premium account. If I couldn't afford the premium account and I just want free advertising, I would either look at Craigslist or Facebook.
So walk me through just at a high level that process of working with landmodo.com. Just as a high level. You see some land. Go ahead.
You just would basically market your property. You come up with a good headline, and you just look at the four marketing fundamentals of anything. So you want to have a strong headline, right? I love big lots. I cannot lie, right? Or make this land great again. Something where it's going to be clickable, right? So I love this, make this land great again, because half the people hate that headline. Half the people love that headline.
Yeah.
So Dan Kennedy's like, if you're not offending someone by noon,
Polarizing.
you're
Absolutely.
not working hard enough. So, marketing, you got to choose your people. So you got to have a strong headline, but then you've got to have strong pricing. You got to make it irresistible in the pricing. And then there needs to be urgency, scarcity, and a clear call to action. Those are really all the components. I also recommend what we call an anchor. So an anchor is basically saying, hey, we understand you don't know the value of this land. So we market that, this property was $499 down, $499 a month. And then that's the anchor. We put a line through it. And then we say $299 down, $299 a month, instant equity. You can't unsee the $499. And so we are automatically like, oh, this is a deal.
Yeah.
This is on sale. Right? Another great headline, don't tell my wife. Well, what's going on with that? Click there. All right, great. What's this guy doing? Like, why is he selling it? So you're going to have fun with it. You want to be creative, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's all about making it irresistible, making it a car payment. Think about the biggest selling cars in the country, right? They're always like Honda Accord or Toyota Camry. They're always priced at that $399 a month, $299 a month, $199 a month. If you got a job, you can afford it.
Wow. Okay. So as far as I was gonna say, you kind of answered my question, but is all land created equal? Like, when you start and go on land, you said Land Motto, for example.
Landmodo.com. Yeah, all land is, in my mind, it's all created equal if you can buy it at 25, 30 cents on the dollar. You making your money on the buy. Like I learned the hard way. I'll tell you the story. So I'm starting out, I'm going to look for more land with my buddy. And we go to, I don't know if you've ever heard of a place called Las Vegas, New Mexico. Anyways, it's like they have a university there. And we're looking at this land and we can buy it what's called over the counter. You can just buy it directly from the county because the land did not sell for the minimum price of the taxes. So the county's like, well, if no one's going to even put the minimum on this, we'll just sell it to somebody over the counter. And there's 100 lots there, an acre each. And we're driving around looking at it. And Ruben, I'm telling you, to me, this property looked like Chernobyl. There wasn't a tree in sight. I mean, it was just ugly, ugly land. And so my buddy's like, well, we can pick this up for $50 an acre. He's like, what's the worst that could happen? I'm like, I'll tell you what the worst thing is can happen. People are going to buy it. They're going to look at it and they're going to hate you for it. So this is what's going to happen. You're going to get refunds. If you don't get a refund, you're going to get a lawsuit. So he's like, you sure you don't want to split it? I'm like, yeah, I don't want to split it. So he buys all of it at $50 each. And he starts selling it online. And he starts emailing me the sales. And he's killing it. So
let me ask you, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. What do they see in that land that you didn't see?
Good question. I don't know. It's a really good question. And the honest answer is I don't know. My best guess is it's just like anything else in life. Value is in the eye of the beholder. I really don't know.
So interesting. So in going into it, is there a metric or formula that you use to say, hey, in an area where there's not any more urban, this is where I focus, or an area where the cities are expanding? Like, I'm just trying to understand if someone's listening, like, how do they, considering that we all live on land and there's so much land around us, we drive by empty lots all the time. What makes a good plot of land separates a good plot of land from a great one, I think is where I was going with this.
It's 25 cents on the dollar.
Wow.
That's a great piece of land is when you can buy it at 25 cents on the dollar. There's someone else on the other end of that deal. Even if you have to wholesale it at 50 cents on the dollar, I've never been stuck with a piece of raw land. So he's emailing me, by the way, all these sales on this ugly, ugly land. And I keep emailing him back a refund. And then I email him back refund/lawsuit. He sells all of it. He makes $100,000. Guess how many refunds he had? 0.
Jeez.
And no lawsuits. So I learned a $50,000 lesson that day. Don't be a land snob. And now I'm not. I mean, I'm not the market. You're not the market. There's someone out there that wants affordable, raw, undeveloped land. Maybe you and I don't want it, but there's a huge market of people that do.
So this question, it comes from, a wholesaler. How as a wholesaler, because I think these are great segues. You're talking about great land is based on the price that you can get it for, right? From what I'm hearing, if it's 25 cents on the dollar, whatever the case might be. As a wholesaler, what are the key things that you want to include in your marketing? I know you talked about what it would look like online, but when you're trying to bridge the gap between buyer and seller, what other things would you add in that scope for someone who's thinking, hey, I want to get into this and I want to be the middleman because I know that I can find them, I know I can list them, and I know that there's going to be buyers. How do you bridge that gap?
I mean, the wholesaler just makes it easier for the for the buyer, really. I mean, they're just going to provide the due diligence. They're going to provide the pictures and the plat maps and the aerial maps, and they're going to provide what's compelling about the property, so that the retailer is going to pay a premium to the wholesaler, because then they can go and sell at retail. That's really all it is. It's really simple to wholesale.
Very interesting. How long is the due diligence when, for, let's say, a developer who's buying large parcels of raw land? How could, just to give the listeners some context, how long is that due diligence typically?
Well, I don't think I understand the question. So
I think if you're looking, because from what I understand, there's some, sometimes there is a due diligence period, and you mentioned it. Now, how long is that period from the due diligence that would happen in your field? Again, I have
I misunderstood because you said developer. Who's developing?
So I guess whoever's buying, maybe there's an intention to be a developer, right? So you would buy raw land, but I think the question, this is coming from the audience here, I think what they're asking is, how long is that due diligence? And I guess that due diligence could be just for any buyer. If the buyer happens to be a developer, that's one thing. But I think the question is on how long is the due diligence period for someone who's buying large parcels of raw land?
I can do due diligence in 2 days. I can close in a week.
Is that based on, you want to go into your systems a little bit? Like, what makes a due diligence last longer versus shorter? Like, what needs to happen? Is it a permits thing? Is it?
No, it's just really simple. I mean, it's just a piece of raw land. So there's nothing physical on there. So do we have a plat map, an aerial map, a satellite map? That's really it. And then once we have that, we want pictures of the property. I might pay $50 if I've never been out there, or someone's never seen the property. Local Craigslist gig, take pictures, shoot video. I want to make sure no one's dumping on the property. I want to see what the road looks like. Can they get to it? What are the GPS coordinates? I mean, a lot of this can be done with technology.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
Like I said before, like, you're connected to an American title company. You do your title search, make sure there's no chain, no break in the chain, no liens, no encumbrances. And, because this is inexpensive, there's not usually, it's really rare to find any cloud on title or liens or encumbrances, but you got to check. If you're worried about any kind of environmental issue, you go to epa.gov, make sure you're not buying a Superfund site, but that's usually going to be like New Jersey or Ohio or Pennsylvania, like manufacturing areas. Rural land out west, southwest, northwest, that's not an issue. So due diligence is pretty simple. If you're looking to develop it, you can go a little bit deeper. What's the water table like? How far from utilities? And again, planning and zoning will help you with all this. Local surveyor will help you as well. So it just depends.
Interesting. So I'm glad you you made that. So I guess in short, the process from becoming a buyer to an owner of land, again, very different from when we talk about other types of real estate, is the due diligence of the actual plot of land that you're buying, and then checking with the title company that there isn't any liens or anything on that. Okay, excellent.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, this is another question from the audience here. Pros and cons of buying or selling raw land versus residential land. Is there a difference there? Yeah.
No, I think the only difference is your price point. So if you're buying an infill lot and you're buying in Atlanta,
Mhm.
that's just going to be more expensive. So, we don't want to be in the speculation game. We want to be in the investing game. And I feel like if you're, buying in, like, say, New York or Atlanta, San Francisco, you're, if you've got a valuable piece of land, you're going to go to the land broker and you're going to pay retail. I want the land that somebody is distressed and has to sell or really wants to sell. They have no use for it anymore. And I'm investing in it. I'm buying it 25-30 cents on the dollar. That's the difference.
Very interesting. Love that.
Now, if you can get it, great. If you can buy it an infill lot, 25-30 cents a dollar, residential lot, 25-30 cents a dollar, great. It's just harder to find.
Very interesting. And how long do your notes that you typically own, how long are they structured for? Are we looking at 30 years, 20, 10? How does that look like?
30 years, 20, 10, 5, 3.
Oh, interesting.
All over.
So
it just depends on the value of the land.
Interesting. This is really fascinating. So let me ask you, what is next for you? Because I mean, it's such an interesting background that you have of coming from. I'm not surprised, by the way, coming from the acquisitions, understanding the power, and I love how you put things into perspective, where you're getting 300% returns versus what you were seeing in the private equity, and which just puts things into perspective. And it's so interesting because it's not it's not a shiny object, right? Like, it's literally dirt that we're talking about. But what do you see as, you've been at this for 20 years. Do you see that things have shifted? Do you see that the opportunity is still there? Do you see that this we're not, they always say we're not making any more land. Like, what do you see as your forecast? Again, if you're listening to this, depending on when you're listening to this, it's Q1 of 2022. What are your thoughts on this business model and where you are in your business right now?
So I always ask myself the Jeff Bezos famous question: if everything's going to change and everything is going to change, what's not going to change? And what I don't think is ever going to change is I think people always want a real asset, and I think they'll always want a good deal. So as long as those two things remain, then the land investing niche will continue to thrive. Now, what's interesting about the business is that it's inefficient. You can't go on Zillow and figure out what a piece of raw land is worth. No one knows. So we're all just kind of making it up as we go along. There's not, comparable sales are all over the place. So you have to kind of figure out the market. So the other issue then is, are these margins sustainable? Well, when I first started, it was 300%. 22 years later, it's still 300 to 1,000%. Why is that? Well, the reason that is that you're talking about the most boring niche on earth. So you don't go on HGTV or the DIY network and see flip this land. The before pictures raw land, the after pictures raw land. It's just not sexy. All we do is shuffle paper and make money. So the other issue is it's a massive market. There's billions of acres of land for sale available and no one doing it. You, me, a million people could be in this niche. We'll all run out of money before we run out of deal flow. And the reason being is, if you go to a RIA meeting, a real estate investment association meeting, 100 people in that room, 99 of them are wholesalers, landlords, or flippers. You and I will be the only land people because, again, it's boring.
This is crazy. I love this. This is like this paradigm shift. It's fascinating because it is true that, like I said, I've only had we're 160 plus episodes in. Only had I can count on my hand how many land guys we've had, which just shows you also, kind of red ocean. What is it? Red ocean, blue ocean, or blue ocean strategy?
Yeah, blue ocean strategy. I love
Blue
that.
ocean strategy. Yeah. That's where is everybody doing? Oh man, so this is just fascinating what you're saying, and I want to just right before we drop off because I told you you're the land geek and I'm a tech nerd, so I'm hoping we can come together on here and just huddle up one last round here.
Sure.
Tell me about your systems in your way that you're able to do this remotely, because I geek out about that stuff. And like I said, you asked me where I am right now, and that's not where I always am. And I happen to be in the real estate space as well. So what how do you structure? You touched on it a little bit. What does that kind of operation look like, so that the listeners can kind of get an idea of what that looks like on the back end?
So essentially, first you got to start off with software. So we have a software that we call it LG Pass, the Land Geek proprietary automated software system. So you just upload a list, you put it into the software, you price the list, and then it automates the mailings via an API with a mailing company. And we got a really great deal. So it's really inexpensive for first class mail. Then from there, there's all this technology where you can, if it's a bad address, your team can go in, they can mark it as a bad address. You can use a binverified.com, get a good address, remail it, and do all of that. And you can automate it on a drip. So if you say you've got 10,000 people on a list, well, you don't want to send out 10,000 offers at once. You couldn't handle the due diligence. So you can drip 20 a day if you want. If you see the market change on you, you can automatically change the pricing in it. And then it takes you into due diligence. You've got your due diligence piece of it as well. Then it takes you into the marketing. So you can push out your marketing all the way into sales, and then it automates the contracts with your promissory note, land sale contract, and purchase sale agreement. What used to take me 20 minutes of paperwork, it takes 1 second. Again, we can always make more money. We can't get more time. Then you use inexpensive virtual assistants around the world. I have a team in Jamaica, I have a team in the Philippines, and they're all well trained. It's great, right?
I'm just curious, how many folks do you have on your team?
I don't even know. I don't manage it, but enough.
Are we saying everything like 50, 30?
No. I bet you it's 15 or less.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah.
And I was gonna ask you, just so this doesn't slip through the cracks, you said mailers, those are like traditional, I think wholesalers will be able to connect with this, where you're reaching out to homeowners and you're reaching out about or not homeowners, but I guess vacant lot owners, right? Where you're reaching out about their land.
We're sending a letter. Yeah, we're not sending a postcard. We're sending an actual offer.
What would it say at a high level? We're literally, pain point.
It just says, we're interested in buying your land at this price, contingent upon these things during due diligence.
And so then you have an incoming also call center where people are taking the inbound incoming calls as well.
We have a US based intake manager that will then handle that intake piece.
Okay. And then do they need to be briefed on the area? Like, do they get granular, or is it more of like a system process of, okay, if you're interested, this is what happens next? I'm just very curious because it sounds like you're going all over the place. So I'm curious as to, I've done some cold calling in the past, just trying to understand what were some of those obstacles and barriers you would need to overcome.
There's no obstacles or barriers. It's just basically saying, you got your offer, great. They go into the program. They're compensated to renegotiate down. So they'll say, oh yeah, during due diligence. So then it's like, okay, here's your deal. They say, oh, I'll accept it for $2,500. Like, great. Here's how the process works. We're going to do due diligence. I'll get back to you in about 7 days before closing. If we find anything in due diligence, I'll let you know. If we find something in due diligence, it's like, I'm so sorry. The most we can offer you now is $2,100. So for every $100 that they can negotiate down, they get compensated an extra hour of their time.
That's the team you're referring to, your team
for intake manager, right? So it's really simple, and they just have a process and a system, and they're trained and it's easy.
Love it. I love it. Listen, this is Mark. This was gold. I gotta ask you, just because I could be here all day just drilling, and I know you've been on a marathon, and I can't even thank you enough for spending time. But I gotta ask you, if you were to include one thing in your Dirt Rich book that you left out, or just from your experience, your ever growing experience, what would that one thing be for our listeners that you're like, ooh, I would add that in there just for context for us.
I
in your years.
actually solved it. I'm writing my second book called Dirt Rich 2, The Next Plot.
Love it.
So what I left out was how to scale your land business. So Dirt Rich is about starting a land business. Dirt Rich 2 is about scaling the business and getting yourself out of it, so you don't create another job for yourself. So that is what I would have put in there.
And I'm assuming it's just based on what we just talked about. It's just really leveraging systems and automations and technology, right? Is that what you would say?
Absolutely.
I love that. Oof, love it, man. Well, this comes full circle. It's 2022. We're here. You mean you're still glowing about this? You're thriving. You're scaling. What do you think is next for you? You're talking about scale. Like, what are we trying to do here? Are you trying to take over the world here? What is next for you and your Frontier Equity Properties? What is next?
I mean, for me, I just want to keep growing as an entrepreneur and as a person and helping people. So I really don't think about these crazy goals. I'm not hell bent on world domination. I just want to get better every day.
Well, I think if anyone's can claim that they're taking over the world, it's with the kind of business that you're in. It's kind of in alignment there, but kind of a nice pun there. But no, it's that's very fascinating. Look, I can't, Mark. This was super, and again, I want to plug for our listeners. If you're driving, keep your hands on the wheel. We will include this in the show notes. Dirt Rich is the current book that you have, but you are working on Dirt Rich Part 2, which is very exciting. We'll look out for that. Also, as well, you can check out the landgeek.com for more of what's going on in Mark's world. But otherwise, where else can people get in touch with you? I mean, is this something that you're actively, do you have a network where you're actively sharing this? Are you teaching it or anything like that? Or are you just simply out here?
I teach it. You can learn more at the landgeek.com. There's Dirt Rich, and then there's the podcast, the Art of Passive Income podcast.
That's awesome. Make sure we include that in the show notes. And just like that, Mark, I want to thank you for coming on the show. And you continue to build. It's funny because that is our anthem here. Continue to build. And I think we'll build on the foundation that you laid today. It's fair to say.
Thanks, Ruben.
Absolutely. Just like that, we are out.